So, what does it really take to write a book and see it to publication? That's what I'm going to share with you today in part four of how I wrote my books. Hey, everybody, I'm Rikki Heller from rikkiheller.com. I'm a writer, editor, and book coach, and I help you to find that writer deep inside of you so that you can finally write your book, find your authentic voice, and share your message with the world. So today I'm talking about my fourth book, Living Candida Free. If you've been following this series, I was talking about Naturally Sweet and Gluten Free yesterday, or last time, which was a cookbook of recipes that I converted from one book to another, made them gluten free, and it was how I found my literary agent and got this book contract. Well, while I was writing Naturally Sweet and Gluten Free and working on schedule with my publisher, I was approached by another publisher to write a book about Candida. At the time, I had a blog about Candida, and I'm a holistic nutritionist as well. And so I was helping clients with their Candida. And I guess the publisher found my blog and wanted me to write a book. And that's the book I had been dreaming about writing right from the beginning. So, of course, I said yes. But at the time, I was only about halfway through my first book. So I was juggling two book contracts at the same time, and I really learned a lot from that experience. First of all, working with a book publisher, this publisher for Naturally Sweet and Gluten Free was what they call one of the big five publishers. So it was a very well established publisher, very well known, huge international publisher. And so the process was much more professionally approached. There were many more people involved. And so there were also a lot of more checks and balances and requirements because I wasn't able to just speak directly with the publisher or the editor at any time I felt like. It was really working with a huge corporation. And that had some advantages, but also some drawbacks. So I'm going to talk about some of the things I learned in the process. Because I was working on two contracts at once, I learned to work very quickly and be very disciplined in my writing. And what that taught me is that this is a kind of approach anybody can do with their book. You don't need to be bound to a contract with a publisher to create some kind of schedule where you work regularly on your writing. And that's really why I developed Write with Rikki, my weekly writing session where we meet up on Zoom live with other writers. We focus, we write for about an hour, and then we can go our separate ways. Or I'm also offering people an opportunity to actually work with me in coaching and editing for that span after we write. I reserve a little bit of time at the end so you can actually have me review your work, provide feedback. This is an amazing opportunity. If you haven't worked with a coach before or an editor, you get to work with a professional editor and coach for free. So I'm going to put the link in the comments for Write with Rikki. It happens every week at Tuesdays at 8:30 Eastern AM, and we write for about an hour. So that's one way for you to start developing the writing habit, the writing practice, which is what literally saved me when I was writing two books at once. The other thing I learned, besides what it's like to work with a much larger staff and many more people on my book, is that there are certain things that professional publishers and just established publishers are aware of that I didn't encounter in my first book. Not because these rules didn't apply, but because it just wasn't part of the book. So with Living Candida Free, it was a book that was divided in two. The first half was my story and written as a guidebook for people dealing with Candida. So this was all around behaviors and learning new habits and stocking your kitchen and what do you do when you go out to eat? How do you handle living on this diet? And then only the second part were recipes, whereas my previous two cookbooks were all recipes. There wasn't any sort of guidebook involved there. So as I was telling my story, I began to learn what you can and cannot say. I mean, it was sort of like a mini memoir at the beginning of this book where I was telling what happened to me during that period. One example that stands out for me is the publisher would not allow me to include a story about a particular encounter with one of my many medical professionals. And at the time, I said, but I did not name the medical professional. I didn't state the gender of the medical professional. I didn't even state the city in which the medical professional was working. but the answer was no. If there's any chance a person could see themselves in that story, then you could be legally liable. So I had to take that story out. Now, I don't think the book suffered in the end, but that was just one of the things. The other thing to be aware of when you're working with a publisher, especially a large publisher, and if this was my first contract with them, so I did not include in the contract certain things like who gets final say on the cover of your book, on the cover design. That usually goes to the publisher. If someone is a huge name in the field, they can ask for final say on something like that, or collaborative work on the cover. So this is the cover of my book, the American version of the book. So this is from Hachette in the US, and they designed this cover. These are photos that were taken by my photographer of the recipes inside. So there are lots of photos of the recipes in the middle section of the book. Now, at the moment, this book is no longer available with color photos because the publisher made that decision that they were no longer going to insert color photos. But the first few years of the book were colored. Now, that's the American cover right here again. This is the Canadian cover with HarperCollins. Which one do you like better? Do you have a preference? I can tell you my preference. I like this one better. I think this is just a prettier cover. I think it's cleaner looking. It's more modern looking. To me, this kind of cover reminds me of my old textbooks, I hate to say. So, that's not something over which I had any say. And that's something I really learned in that process too, is if there are things you feel very strongly about in your book, before you even sign your contract, you want to work them into your contract that you would have some say over those kinds of things. But I think primarily the lesson for writers, whether or not you've published a book, that I got from working on Living Candida Free is that you can produce way more than you think you're capable of in a shorter time period if you're really focused and determined and have some goals. And that's part of the reason why, as I say, accountability is so important. Having a group of writers or an accountability partner or a writing coach to keep you accountable, to provide deadlines so that you can create a schedule that you stick by. If I hadn't had those deadlines assigned to me and I knew that work had to be handed into the publisher by a particular time, I might have taken a lot longer to write the book. And quite frankly, I don't think that would have been as good for the book, for me, for the people who really benefited from reading this book and implementing what's in it. So that's just something to keep in mind. Setting yourself a particular schedule and sticking by creating that writing habit is so, so, so important when you write a book. This one came out in 2015. It's also still available on Amazon and whatever country you're in, because the publisher is distributing it worldwide. So you can still get this book if you're interested on Amazon as well. All right, everybody, I hope that's helpful. If you'd like more of this kind of information, I do hope you'll subscribe to my weekly newsletter at rickiheller.com/subscribe. Also in the notes below if you want to get that link. And I will see you again next time. Take care.